Okay, Patrick, right, we're doing this interview predominantly because you're a very successful professional gambler. Now, you've been involved in several coups, but unusually, including horses that you've actually got on at 100 to 1 and 50 to 1 and all the rates down. I mean, how do you keep that from getting out?
Oh, it's a very complicated answer, Simon. I don't know if I can dive. Go on then, it's simple. It's 3 words. You don't tell anyone. We come back to what I said earlier on about trusting 99%, trusting 100%. The easiest thing to do is to decide who absolutely has to know. This is all over 10 years ago. I haven't done anything like that for a long, long time. But back in the day when there was, a horse that I owned or co-owned, and you were lining something up in that situation. There would always be, we can trust this person, he's 100%. And it's not that person deliberately does you wrong. It's they accidentally, they make a mistake, they say something, they're overheard something, they're seen texting something, or they just assume that the person they're telling you can absolutely be trusted. And so many, gambling situations get unshipped by not the friend deliberately doing you wrong, but doing accidentally, not realizing what he's saying or who's hearing him or whatever. So the simplest thing is keep the circle much smaller than people would do. And then you've got to obviously be organised enough that you don't need to forewarn 57 people that it's about to happen. So in the case of the 100 to 1 you mentioned, exponential, I can't remember the exact race time, but let's say it was 2 o'clock, it was early in the afternoon. I think at 1:52, if it was a 2 o'clock race, memory's not precise the minute now, at that point 2 people knew, literally me and the trainer. And sure, I'd had to have people ready for about 5 minutes earlier than that. People had been readied, but then I was readying people all the time. I was, so they didn't know even which race it was, never mind which horse. So that wasn't significant then to be ready. So the fact that I was able to get people ready without having to tell them, and then at 1:52 suddenly the torpedo was launched. For example, there was a guy there who had a share in that horse who helped put the money on, but he trusted me and was happy with the situation where I would tell him when it was time to put the money on. And in fact, as I recall, he was up a ladder at 1:45, but he trusted me to get him down from the ladder and into action in time, and he did,
How much of a buzz is that when you land something like that?
I remember in the final furlong and thinking, go on, go on. And you probably didn't call it until a point when it would have been 1.01, 5 seconds earlier, but you don't like to call it when there's that much at stake. Good.
Now, did you ever organise a coup and then ever chuckle to yourself when somebody like the late great Barney Curley got the blame?
It was more common that things were put down to me that weren't down to me. There were plenty of times when they didn't, but I tended to know when, according to how I was playing my hand, I would tend to know which times it was going to be spotted and which times it wasn't. But obviously the bookmakers, they've always had this thing that sort of they can get carried away and they want to knock a bet back to £25 and then they shorten the price, and sometimes they go back at it with the other bookmakers. And of course that's fine, but you do that and occasionally you're going to get the wrong signal. There were plenty of times the market had it correct, plenty of times when they didn't know anything at all, they didn't twig it, plenty of times when they probably twigged the wrong horse originally, that's all. But that's all part of it, isn't it? That sometimes you have to box a little bit clever.
Now, the bookmakers do love to squeal terribly when somebody actually gets one over on them, almost to the point of calling foul. Now, do you think it's fair to organise a touch and tuck up those poor bookies?
My views on this have actually changed. There's a danger of people sort of saying, well, that's all a bit hypocritical, but I think the world has changed. When I first got into racing, having a horse and laying it out for pump was spoken about in hallowed terms. There would have been 99 positive comments about that sort of thing for every one negative. Now, I was clear about one thing, and some people have struggled to believe me on this. We never had a situation where jockeys were told on a previous day not to win. There were quite a few times when horses that were not fancied at all went and won. There was a situation at the Ayr Western meeting where a horse was absolutely not fancied, but always the jockey would be out there doing the best, and we'd had to go bet on the second horse. If people don't believe that, you get much better prices in that situation, because you come back to the thing you said before about this very small circle, that when no one knows, you get a massively bigger price. and also you're able to get on that price much closer to the race because you're not competing with all the people that know. So that for me was why I was happy with it on a moral basis, that if, it might have been our judgment that the horse might win on this race, but if we were wrong 1, 2, 3, 4 races earlier, then fine, the horse went and won. And that happened quite a few times. I remember one situation where I had a co-owner who was absolutely livid, and probably still is to this day. Now, generally speaking, when people came in on horses with me, they did very well. But there were the odd time, and this time the chap was furious that the horse had won when I said I didn't fancy it at all. And he assumed there was a tacit understanding that the horse would not win, and I said that's not how it works, But my views have changed. As I say, back then, things were spoken about much more positively. Now it's a much more even thing. You still get lots of we're nice, well done, putting one over the bookies. But now it's a two-way market. Punters are a lot more self-righteous now. They don't necessarily want to accept the way things were. And now, as I say, I haven't had a horse set out to land a punt in over 10 years, and I've no intention. It's partly, of course, also influenced by the fact you can't get on to any significant degree to sufficiently large bets to make it worthwhile, but also that situation that in terms of us preserving the popularity of sport, you've got a much more aware punter, you've got all the different sort of Twitter and forums and this, that, the other, and in that situation now it can be the punter who loses, who's laid the bet when you win. The agenda has changed, and I think, I remember it was Barry Hills quoted saying that, the punter loves a whiff of corruption. I'm not sure they do anymore, and I think now, I've always been an advocate of strong regulation of riding tactics, of there being an extra rule below non-trier that says, well, we're not saying you didn't try here, and I've had discussions with the authorities a number of times about this, that having everything where the rule come under the running horses on their merits banner, there needs to be a rule below that says, we're not saying that, we're just saying that on this occasion we didn't see enough. And so it'll be a much smaller penalty, but we're saying we didn't see enough, we need to see more to make sure that horse was raced fairly. I do think that slightly more towards the sort of Hong Kong situation where there is tight regulation is a good thing now, because you do not want a situation, as I've said before, where the punter knows that if he's backed Chelsea against Liverpool on a Sunday afternoon and he's behind with the football equivalent of a furlong to run, he at least knows they're trying like mad to score. What you don't want is a situation whereby he's had an each way bet and inside the final furlong he can't detect whether the jockey's bothered or not. That's not helping us. So I think the situation has changed, and my view has changed.
Okay, now slightly ambiguous, I've got to say it, but how have you managed to stay one step ahead of the increasingly draconian bookies?
Well, it isn't easy, and I've had to suppose spread my wings a bit. I probably had to have the ability to find more potential situations and get round them in different ways, but ultimately, probably you have to have more bets and accept smaller stakes than you used to. There's other things I could say, but obviously, back when I wrote the book, I said a lot because I was going to change a lot, and I have made many changes, and a lot of people have no idea. Pretty much everybody has no idea what I'm doing on any day, and that's essential now. The market's got a lot weaker. Now,
you've won millions backing horses, but I think most people would say it's fair game that the bookies don't really want to take your bets anymore. But there's people out there that haven't won millions or even thousands that get restricted to pennies. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, this is a tricky subject, and I may even surprise a few people here. One of the things that's coming obviously is the affordability checks and the money laundering and this, that and the other, and that's a situation that is outside the bookmaker's control. Admittedly, it has been abused on occasions, and they should be cautious about that. The reputational damage, if they apply the restrictions much more stringently to people who've won, they're trying to claim their winnings, and there have been some well-publicised situations there, and they should be careful about that, as I say, in terms of the political damage they could do. But on to the business of taking bets, yes, there are situations where bookmakers have been over stingy. They should rethink the situation. It's possible the bean counters have gone too far, because now the situation has been reached where it's becoming more widely publicised that they can be very windy about taking bets, that they don't like bets from winners, and that potentially impacts on the number of people on a bet. I think in that situation, as I say, now when you've got more self-righteous punters, it may well be that you can achieve a higher P&L by being super sort of stingy about what level of activity you allow. They probably want to rethink about that. As I say, there's a widely held belief now that they may be hitting their long-term turnover. But the point, as I say, that may surprise a few people is that in this discussion, not enough is said that there's a large body of punters whose offering to the bookmaker is ridiculous, that could not possibly be sustained as acceptable. For a while, when exchanges came in, it was possible to get away with all sorts of things, and for punters to just spend their whole time watching the internet smoke signals and giving the bookmaker no margin whatsoever. Bookmaking would never have existed if the punter was always able to monitor exactly where things were on the exchanges and provide only a small filter of his business, his or her business, in a way, just tailored by how things were sitting on the machine. That was never how bookmaking worked, and so there's been quite a big class of punters that expected the original offering of a bookmaker. You can bet a decent bet in any race at any time, any horse, but they wanted to now apply it when they could see exactly how things sat on the machine and be totally obsessed by that. So they only want to play when the exchange price is the same, or maybe very slightly bigger, or in some cases only when it's under. Bookmaking would never have worked if that was like that. In the old days, sure, you might have thought you knew a warm one, but for all you knew, you were going in for 9 to 4 about a horse that if there'd been an exchange, it was 4.2. For all you knew, you had a hot tip for it, but 5 people had a big reason why it couldn't win. And for all you knew, there was another horse in the race that was just about to be crashed, but it hadn't come out on because there was no exchanges back then. So the ability to follow the exchanges means that bookmaking has changed, and people who expect that they can offer not their business, but just that subset of, I think this is about to shorten business, and expect to be accommodated in the way they were before the exchanges, that's not fair. And the bookmakers probably could have been slightly stronger in articulating the situation that, yes, there are people out there that probably should be more generous to, who aren't much threat to them and are being overly restricted. But equally, there's a large body of some quite vocal punters, some vocal punters who would say have every reason to be aggrieved, but some others who really need to realise that the days soon after the exchanges coming in aren't coming back, and that if they're not willing to offer a decent spread of their business at different times of day, and as I say, not just entirely governed by where the exchanges are or where they're going to be in 5 minutes, then yeah, some of them need to adapt.